officially recording now, if all goes well. As we know, power issues have affected a lot of us, so hopefully that won't happen right now. And as Jill mentioned, we'll be taking some breaks for question and answer, and then at the end of the presentation I'm about to do, we'll spend the rest of the time just answering your questions. But during my part here, as I'm talking, if you do have any questions in the middle of something, if you're familiar with Zoom, you can raise your hand. And if you're not, there's a menu where if you click on participants, you should be able to see the raise hand function. So I'll do my best to now and then glance over at that menu to see if anybody does have any questions, because I can't see you all at the same time. But I will stop and start, so hopefully we can get questions answered. So let me tell you, first of all, about us. Kevin and I are the co-founders of 3R Media. It's a production company. And as Jill mentioned, we specialize in education, training, and promotion, both for broadcast and the web. We have hundreds of years of experience in the field, and you can tell because sometimes we say words like film and filming when obviously we haven't used film for decades now. I like to write and mostly photograph birds. Kevin is an expert camera and audio technician, also the co-owner of Ronin and Ronin Productions, a volunteer in many projects. I spend most of my volunteer hours helping to organize a big book festival in South Jersey. So over the course of the next 3 weeks, which we will begin today, we will today begin by introducing what makes a good story. And we'll explore objectives and creativity to brainstorm ideas. We'll talk about the pre-production process, including how we focus our concept into what we call the treatment, which leads to the script and the storyboard. Then next week, production basics, creating the best possible sound and image using a smartphone and laptop. We'll delve into lighting, camera angles, foregrounds, and backgrounds, followed by discussion of directing non-professional talent and the art of the interview, which will include some relaxation techniques, maybe even an acting exercise. And then the third week, it'll be time to decide what goes into the video and what will be left on the cutting room floor. We'll introduce some editing techniques and what to do with the final media file. So let's get started. We all have ideas and stories. For each of us, telling our story is as human and as natural as breathing. We all do it. The trick is figuring out how to tell your story in a way that captures and keeps your viewers' attention. And that's why we're here today, to help you tell your story by breathing life into your story, to explore your passion, to brainstorm ideas, and to learn the tips and tricks used by professional communicators in a world dominated by social media. So what makes a good story? Consider a topic, one you care about, or something you've been assigned to address. Is it a topic everyone can relate to? If not, how would you explain it? Is there conflict, tension? What is the impact on you, on others? What do these things mean to you? I want you to take a moment to think about your story. Even write down a sentence about the story you'd like to communicate. If you don't write it down, that's okay. Just hold on to it. We're going to use that as a starting point. Think about that story. It may be a great idea, but consider how to communicate it by narrowing in on what it's really about. What is the message? What is the objective? Why do people need to hear it? Can you boil it down to one sentence? As professional media communicators, it's the first question we ask at the beginning of planning a media production. So much of this depends on your audience. So that's the next question. Who's the target audience? Who do you want to see your story? Everyone. Of course, that's a dream we all have, millions of views and shares, right? The general audience at large, but it's important to get specific first. Is it a niche audience? Who are they? The most successful stories work because their storyteller is passionate about the subject and their storyteller fully understands the objective. So what is the story you wish to share with your audience? Remember, as I mentioned before, you need to know the point of the video. This may depend on where your audience will see the video and what you want your viewers to do with that video. Something every good story has, whether it's very personal, as in your own story, or something that everyone relates to, or something that happened 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Every story that makes us notice, keeps us interested, turns us upside down, lifts us up. Every good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's story structure. When you tell your story, consider how it fits into that formula. How does it start? What is the beginning? Maybe it's that sentence you boiled down earlier. And for those of you who are just joining us, what we talked about was focusing your idea for a story or whatever the story is you need to tell by boiling it down to one sentence. That's probably a good place to start when you're telling your story. If it's your personal story, is it when you were born? Is it when you first received life-changing news? What happened then in the middle? And then figure out how you're going to end the story you're telling. So how do we all do that? We break down the process into 3 categories: pre-production, production, and post-production. And this week, we are talking about pre-production. So to begin, choose a central character. Even if the video you're producing has very little story, it's best if a single person does most of the talking. Know who will be on screen most of the time. Again, identify the point of the video, that one sentence you boiled down. You're going to put that sentence in the beginning of the document we call the treatment. So your treatment handout, you may have gotten handouts. That first page of it looks like what you're seeing on the right side of your screen. And this is a template that you can use to start writing your treatment. Just so you know, in that handout, there are 2 other examples you can look through, and that's just to get an idea of what typically goes into a treatment. But first and foremost, start with the title and that first sentence that you boiled down. That's the proposal. The proposal is for know that objective. What is that first sentence? What is this about? If you don't see exactly that formula in the examples in that handout, that's because they're mine, and I wrote them after years of writing these things. I started to get bored with my own voice in these things and tend to get a little overly verbose. You don't have to do that. In fact, the more to the point, the clearer, the better. Include some brief background information, and then the concept in detail. How do you plan to tell that story? Also, it helps to include a timeline, just to get your head around that, and then a short summary. So often this is a place for you to start, but typically we've also used these sometimes to get approval for grant funding, but it's a great place to start and then eventually lead that into the script. There are many types of scripts: radio plays, movie scripts, scripts for corporate video. We're going to focus on this 2-column type, and this is what we use for most of our projects. A simple table with 2 columns is the easiest way to format it. One side is your visuals, the other side is your audio, your narrator, your interviewee, dialogue. When you start, write out your narrative first, everything that will be said in the audio column. Be sure to write it in a way that you speak. So read it out loud. If it sounds, as I mentioned in my case, too verbose, you can already start editing and try to sound it, make it sound more like you speak. If it sounds like it's too long, tighten it up. But just get to the point as soon as you can. So before I go much further, I do want to just check in with Kevin and see if you've got anything to add about the script process or even the treatment process at this point? And I'm watching to see if anybody else is raising hands too.
No, I think one of the things that I really like that you said was, make it your own words, make it, from the heart. That's how I think communicating this way is the most effective.
Well, I'd like to check in with everybody else to see if you want to give it a shot. Does anybody else have an example right now and of an idea for the story that they're working on or about to work on or would like to work on? And maybe you have an example of what that is really about, and we can shape that first sentence that would start the treatment process. Anyone?
How about one of the videos that we talked about making was the difference between facts versus myths about cancer detection and treatment.
Well, you just named the name, which sounds like you've boiled it down into that first sentence too. So that's a great example of a place to start and a place to start writing that treatment. So if that was the case, and if we went back to that first line, cancer facts versus myths, and it may be...
Oh, sorry to interrupt, Rich. There's one more person trying to get in.
Actually, whoa, hello, there's three. Great. Hi there, if you're just joining us, welcome. What we're talking about is taking an idea for a story that's going to be a video and boiling that idea down into one sentence and then creating what we call the treatment, so we can have that idea right up front on the first line, proposal 4, and then go into a little bit of detail to help shape what the story is going to be about and talk about figuring out how it's going to look and really how to bring it to life.
Okay, Rich, I have, I think, an opening sentence. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, mine is how breast cancer changed my life for the better.
Intriguing and evocative, and I think it's a great title and a first line. So
okay.
You're already on the right track.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. So there's a great example for getting right to the point in shaping your story. Now, the next step is probably going to be, sometimes, personally, I start with writing that concept, so what is this all about? Then I might go back and add some background, which may be some facts, or if you have that handout and you see my examples, some fancy literary references, or like I said, I tend to get a little verbose, but I think it's your opportunity, especially if you're the only one that's going to see the treatment. If it's not going out to try to get grant funding, for example, you can put anything you want in there. It might be a place to keep some notes and to just jot down some ideas that you're going to support in the concept part of it as you're laying out how this might look. So in fact, Gwen, how would you think maybe that this could work as far as the concept of what we would see?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I would develop it now into the different areas that how it, I thought, improved my life. Would that be concept?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you're begging the question, how? So that would, I would just list those how. List them out right off the bat.
Okay. Okay.
that could even be part of the background. And then
Okay.
the concept is really where you would start to explain what we would see, you know, like where would you start? Remember, BME, beginning, middle, end. What's the first thing that you would see? There's tons of different ways to approach this. That's up to you. It's a very personal piece.
Yes.
So do you have an idea of where you would want to start? What's the first thing that you would see in this video?
Okay. Okay. I guess one of the areas it made me more aware. It made me want to read more about what was going on. I wanted to know educationally from verified sources what was being said about this disease. Okay. Then it made me go out of myself religiously too, into that area. So it took me into a lot of areas that I think actually strengthened me. And then it made me want to go out to educate others. Those are my 3 biggies, I guess.
That's awesome. So you've got a nice outline already.
Okay.
And a place to possibly pull something out of this where the video might actually start. Obviously, it's going to start with the title of it, which, as I said, it's evocative, and it's drawing the viewer in right away, because it goes against what you would think, what most people would think. So that's an awesome way to start.
Okay.
And it could start with you literally saying that. And I can imagine this is one way to approach it. You on camera saying that very sentence, and then letting that sink in a second to the viewer. And then maybe that's where music starts. And we start to see you walking to work or doing something that you would be doing, a hobby or something like that. And then we start to get your story, a little bit about you. And maybe we hear your voice while we're seeing you do something. You know, you might even address that question like, yeah, I know it sounds like something you wouldn't expect, but let me tell you why. And then, you know, you basically be the interviewee and narrate the story.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of different ways to approach this. The more creative you get, the more you're drawing the viewer in. I love it. I can't wait to see it.
Okay.
So what you would do after this part, you know, come up with the treatment of it, the concept, maybe fill in the background a little bit with the facts, you know, like maybe the dates. This could be all the more mundane part of it, but those actual facts, you know, the diagnosis, you know, just put some of the science in that background. And then back to the treatment of it, you know, you can funnel that back in and refer back to the background, you know. So it's a place where you can go to look to say, to refer back to, refresh your memory about some things maybe, or support some of the things you're talking about, maybe with, you know, something that is, you know, in the literature. And then that you're starting to get into the middle of the story. So then where does that take you? And of course, don't forget, you have to figure out how to bring all of this to a close. And that could either be part of the concept or in your summary. If you use the summary as a place to then go back and look at the way that this particular story, this video ends, it's almost like your beginning. So the ending is like, this is my new beginning. And, but is that the ending of the piece? I mean, you just have to come up with a way that the whole thing ends. And then last, I would go back, and the timeline is, again, for you as a way to figure out when you're going to spend the time writing this. So you might put I don't know, the first week of August, you're writing it, you know. And then figure out when you're going to actually record this stuff and film it, which is obviously what we're going to be talking mostly about next week. And then again, that post-production part, you can put some dates in there because that gives you an idea of when you expect to have it really completed. And don't forget, if this is something, you know, if there's something that you've got a deadline, like this is something that you've all decided needs to be on the YouTube page or the website, you know, the middle of October or whatever. So that's a way to work backwards for your timeline. If this is a personal project, believe me, you still need deadlines.
Right. Okay.
Like me, your personal projects will drag on for years. So
Yes.
it helps. And, you know, if you miss a deadline in that case, be a little hard on yourself about that. But you're a little more flexible, obviously.
Okay.
So that's a great example of what the treatment is for, how to get you focused on your story and to start to come up with what you want to see, and put all that in the, it doesn't have to be that small paragraph that you see in that template. You know, the more, as I said, the more concise it is, the better, but it's your story. So you've got a lot to say. So fill up that concept and get a little creative with it. It helps to look at others, you know, similar kinds of stories and ideas, the way other people have approached that sort of thing. You've probably watched a lot of other things, possibly when you were first diagnosed, as you're looking for, you know, what other people went through, and you know, you may have seen those kind of videos already. Did they work for you? Did you look at it and say, wow, well, in hindsight, I would have changed how, you know, this is your chance to tweak something that you like that you may have seen already. A lot of my job is watching a lot of other people's work. We all get ideas from each other. So feel free to borrow ideas too. But that's the place to put that, the concept, your outline of how you think this video should be, and then how you have an idea of how long it should be too. Again, if you've already been told, this is going on the website, it can't be longer than 3 minutes because we're living in the age of social media and nobody watches anything more than 2 minutes, frankly. I don't know if I believe that, but it depends on, as I said early, way back in the beginning of this, your audience helps you decide those things, and how they're going to be watching this helps you decide those things. If you're lucky enough to be working with Netflix, you've probably got an hour-long thing you're working on. If it's something that you know, though, it's got to be, you've already been told it's going to be 3 minutes, and then we're putting it on the website. That helps you, you know, narrow down what's going to go into that too, because you're probably sort of reading through your script again as you get to the script part of it. As you write into that audio column, that's going to help you too. And then if once you read all through that and you realize that took 10 minutes and we decided it was a 3-minute piece, then you got to go start editing it again. But that's a great place to start. And I think you're off to a perfect start too. Like I said, I can't wait to see it. And I can't wait to see even the treatment. And then we can start talking about the script. So it looks like everybody's in that's coming. At this point, including those of you who arrived most recently, do you have any questions? If anybody has any questions, you can either use the raise hand Zoom button, or I think you can all unmute yourselves. It's probably set up to do that. So does anybody else have any questions right now, or examples of a story, a video that you would like to tell and to work on in the coming weeks? Oh, Deb, you're raising your hand.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted.
You are unmuted.
Okay, myself and another woman who's on this Zoom, I'm going to be doing some interviews with her that hopefully we will record and then put on Facebook at a later date. Our thoughts are we would probably make 3 short ones, and I guess in listening to you, I think obviously we were thinking 320-minute. That probably sounds like a long time. And basically, it would be called, her name is Deborah, Deborah's DCIS journey. And our thoughts were, as I said, we'd have 3 segments. The first one would be basically about she's gotten the diagnosis, and then she sees several doctors, and then she's processing the information. The next one would be, she's now sort of, and this is loosely speaking, now the next one would be she's going to start really researching complementary integrative approaches to her diagnosis. And then the third one would be, okay, now she's processed the what happened in the first segment, the second segment, and now we're kind of, not that there's a conclusion, but now she will have a treatment plan in place.
Wow. So you've already put a lot of thought into this, obviously.
Yes.
I do want to take it back all the way to the beginning of when we first started here, the idea to boil all of that down. So can you tell me in a sentence, and we'll call it a series in this case, what is this series about?
It is about her journey from her diagnosis to treatment.
Great. Okay. And that's sort of the elevator pitch you may have heard, or log line, it's often called. And examples of that these days, if you stream anything, if you watch Netflix or whatever, as you're scrolling through, they all have the log line, it's typically 2 sentences. It's that elevator pitch. It's the whole story boiled down. And these days they all sound, it's annoying, frankly, because they're all the same, she led a nation, but fate had a different idea for her, talking about but keeping that template in your head is a good way to, say you were pitching this to Netflix. How would you do it?
I think I would pitch it to Netflix, but you mean, well, I would obviously have to put a little more drama into the statement that I gave you.
Yeah. But again, make it a sentence. So one more time, if you could sort of repeat it, and you could say her name, or what would the sentence be?
Let's see, Deborah's Deborah's wrestling with the shock of the diagnosis, to the horror of the suggested, I really wouldn't do this, the horror of the suggested treatment, and how she ultimately resolves the conflicts that are involved in all of that.
Oh yeah, you're on the right track. And all I'm saying is as you're thinking about that, the more thought you put into that log line, that first sentence, it's your jumping off place, but it's also boiling down what everything is about, so that you don't lose focus about your goal. Just keep that in mind. So you're off to a good start. You're in a good place with this. Obviously, you've done a lot of the legwork already, thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So you're to the point where you could probably whip through the treatment part of this, and you want to start writing the script. And that'll give you a better idea if this really needs to be like, are we talking 20 minutes? Once you start writing the narrative, mm-hmm. you may find that you can tell this story in 10, for example.
Sure. Now, how detailed is the script or the narrative? Because I'm thinking of it as sort of an interview, not sort of, but as an interview. So my questions would be scripted, but not necessarily her responses, or should I sort of anticipate what the responses should be?
In that case, and I'm gonna see if Kevin's got some thoughts on this too. And this is something we really want to talk about next time as well, but I suppose we could jump in a little bit. The old art of the interview. I would definitely start with on the script with what you anticipate, the topic, what the subject is going to be. And then I would normally just put bullet points in there. So the bullet points you want her to hit, that kind of becomes your rough working script for now. Once you have that interview, in your case, then you've got to what we call log all that footage, and you might even just write a transcript of it. This isn't for every project that you are all talking about, but a lot of what Kevin and I work on are exactly what you just described. Often our deadline is really fast. We don't have the luxury of sending the interview out to a transcription service. We may just type it ourselves, the significant parts that we know we're going to use. And then I drop that right into that script, because that's where we need to start to build for timing, and also then start to think of what the visuals are. It's not just going to be her face talking the whole time. You have the opportunity to add a lot of footage or graphics, and those are things we can talk about next week too, or the third week. But initially, yeah, you're talking about bullet points and your questions, and that's how I do it. Hey, Kevin, you still there?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you handle if you're thinking about knowing that you're going to be interviewing somebody? You don't necessarily know how long the whole piece is going to be. You're not to the scripting stage, honestly, at that point. So if you're armed with questions, I use it to get an idea of what my visuals are going to be. So if I just put those bullet points in in this script template, for example, then I start to rough out what I might want to show on the visual side. And you can see in this example, we have a spokesperson. This was our 3R promo video. So obviously that person is on screen until they aren't, because the third or fourth block down, we're showing samples of our work, for example. So you might have her on screen in the beginning, but then based on some of what your questions are, is she talking about things that you can get footage of? Like Gwen's video, you might want to see her working on something, a hobby, just to show her in action, so that you can cut to something but still hear her talking. Or if she's talking about specific treatment options or things like that, maybe that's what goes on screen, the graphic itself. So you can start to put that together, knowing that it's going to be a rough version of your script, but it gives you some ideas and a reminder for you of some visuals that you may need to want to get to. Grab screenshots off the internet, anything like that that could go with whatever it is to help illustrate and emphasize what she's talking about.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything, Kevin?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think probably the most of what I've done and we've done, the majority of it is sort of interviewing first and then figuring out how you're putting it together. Would you say that's accurate, Rich?
Yeah, and I don't want to start anybody off with the bad habits that I've developed over the years, because again, often our deadlines are quick turnaround. So, and after doing this for the hundreds of years that I mentioned, we tend to just jump right in at this point. So the way I work, and Kevin probably too, works with interviews, is we already had our questions. We did the research right in advance. We sort of anticipate what those answers are going to be, so that we're ready with follow-up questions too. But then once all that interview has been filmed, then we come back and log it. We do look at the footage, you know, and we make notes from 30 seconds to a minute 30. I definitely want to use this part. So I might write that part out if I don't have time to transcribe the entire thing. But often what we do now is not even bother to put it into a script. We just chunk it right into the edit process. We jump right ahead to that. But I want to give you all the foundational part first. So I'm not going to tell you any more about that. You really do want, the research is so important. You want those questions so that you don't even have to look at your page to ask them. They're part of, you know, you're ready to go with that. And you anticipate what those answers are going to be so that you're also ready with some follow-up questions. And again, we're getting a little bit into the whole art of the interview here, but that helps you seem engaged. And in this case, I'm sure you are already engaged, you know, and you don't have to, it's not like a lot of the projects Kevin and I work on, we're coming in cold. We have to really know the material enough so that the interviewee feels like we're really just having a conversation with them. And you want that to be conversational, but you also don't want to get too excited about something so that you step over their lines, because then you have to edit that. Unless you're part of the story. And that's perfectly valid too. And that's something you want to put in the treatment. If your concept is that you are part of the story and you're going to be showing yourself, you know, leaving your house that day or setting up your Zoom call in advance and show, you know, so that you become part of the story, that's another approach too. I don't know if it's what you were thinking of for this, but in that case, it's okay to have that interview to be a more conversational, stepping on each other's lines kind of thing, because then you don't have to bother cutting yourself out. If that's not the case, and you really just want to get your interviewee to tell their story and you're going to cut yourself out, you tell them that in advance. And often that's what a lot of projects Kevin and I work on. We'll say right off the bat, just so you know, you're not going to hear me ask the question. I'm going to cut that part out. We're going to hear your answer. So if you could answer it in a way that includes the subject. So if I ask you, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And I don't know why that's always my example for some reason, but that's how it is.
Because you like the,
what I tell them is, if I ask you, what did you have for breakfast this morning? You would answer, this morning for breakfast I had. So you want to make sure they're prepared in that style in advance, so that they're ready to answer it. It makes the editing process way easier. So that you don't have to come up with a way, for example, if I forgot to tell them that and they just start saying, I had eggs and they weren't that good, they were runny. Then I have to figure out, let's see, well, there's one technique. I could put the question on a graphic first. So that's what you see, you know, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And then they start talking. So there are ways to approach that, and, you know, but you don't have to be, you don't want to be painting yourself into a corner so that you're forced to use one of those techniques you didn't expect to use. So if right off the bat, they just say, this morning for breakfast, I had eggs. They weren't that good, they were runny. Boom, that's your little sound bite. You don't have to figure out a way to, you know, magically fit that in your piece. It's already finished for you. It's just much easier to edit. So that's a way to prep your interviewee to make sure that they're in advance, they know that. And again, we're going to talk about that stuff later. And also the idea of making sure you keep your instructions to them simple. Just now, I went on way too long with this. When we're actually doing this, we make this so that 1 or 2 or 3 little bullet points in advance to prep your interviewee, so they're ready, but not inundated with, oh yeah, there's this thing I have to tell you, plus all these things I have to remember, because then they're just going to get flustered. So that's just a little pro tip for later. Oh, anybody else? I haven't been looking over to see if anybody's hands are raised here. I don't see any other hands. Does anybody else want to talk a little bit about their project and
Jill has a
Two
question.
great examples already.
Yeah, two things that I just wanted to am I frozen?
Nope.
Okay,
Well, we
great.
can hear you. There
Okay,
you go.
great. Two things that I just wanted to emphasize here are, one, the importance of the objective, what Rich was talking about, you know, for the big things to pull out from today. One thing is to think about really, why are you making this video? Who is your audience and what do you want them to get from it? Is it information? Is it inspiration? Like as Rich kept saying, what is the goal of the video? So for a facts versus myth video, the goal would be that you engaged your audience and really got them interested and comfortable with facts versus myths. So I just wanted to really make sure that as you're starting the whole process, that you really think about the goal for the video and who your audience is. I also wanted to manage everybody's expectations in terms of how involved this video has to be, because you can do something as advanced as, you know, these guys are gonna help us learn how to do video editing and how to use other imagery and, you know, that sort of thing. But you also could do a video as simple as using your phone and shooting yourself with good lighting, talking about the important message that you're trying to get across, and that will qualify as a good video. You know, I've done videos like that for projects that I've worked on with these guys. So for instance, in a newsletter, for a nonprofit organizational newsletter, it may be as simple as just filming yourself on your phone, talking about a message that's important for your viewers to receive. And Rich and Kevin will show us how to light that well and how to plan that well and how to speak well, so that you can make and use your passion so that it ends up being an engaging video. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody isn't worried about having to produce a full scale, completely edited video with, you know, sound bites and visuals and all kinds of stuff. You can make this as simple or as involved as you want it to be. It's up to you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I just wanted to ask, my concern is to do a round table with some people talking about breast cancer and their experiences. Me being as a moderator, that's what I would like to do. That's my goal here.
And would it be a Zoom
Yes.
platform like this?
Be a Zoom presentation.
Oh, you're golden. So what we're doing here, this is what you do. What we're recording right now, for example.
Right.
And we can talk about all that stuff too. I can tell you how we set this up. Are you familiar with, have you used any of these kind of platforms like Zoom before?
Yeah, but I've been a participant, but I want to be able to do that myself.
Gotcha.
Because I want to sponsor it myself. I want the lighting to look good. I want to do it so that we can record it and do it at a different date. I want to do it with like say if I do it next week, to save it to do it a couple of days the following week or the following month. So I want to be able to, I have never set it up myself. Other people have done it. So I want to be able to do that. I want it to look good. I want it to look professional.
So definitely next week, what we're talking about is camera placement, lighting, and a lot of that will be valid for this very thing.
Okay.
And you know, and the backgrounds.
Right. And the questions and how should that look and and all of that. So that was just I'm just throwing out, that was, you know, my main interest. That's what I'm looking at.
Okay. And adding graphics and
Right.
if you plan to do something like this, I mean, I can show you what this is a simple presentation made with PowerPoint. So if you're familiar with PowerPoint, have you used?
Sort of. You know, I think I can maneuver it. I think I can do it and put it together if I put my mind to it.
Yeah, that's, and the more you practice those things, obviously, the more you're going to find, oh, look, I can make it animate. If you'll
Right.
notice, I didn't put any of that into, I find that more distracting than anything, especially for when we're doing something like this. I don't put any of those things into these kind of presentations. Again, like Jill said before, simple is good.
Right.
And I can show you how this was made. I mean, we can talk about all that stuff. That's part of our, next week.
Okay, that sounds great.
We're getting closer to the end of our hour here.
Yeah.
But again, to Jill's point, that's perfectly valid to, especially as I mentioned earlier, the age of social media that we're living in. Entire $1 million ad campaigns have been built to look like they were shot with somebody's iPhone or whatever. And that's what audiences are used to seeing. If you know your audience, that's something we already know about them. They watch their stuff on their phone. So to make it look good, and what those ad agencies do is make it look intentionally maybe a little more rougher, just on purpose, but so that it looked like somebody shot it with their phone. But you want it to look as polished as possible. So yeah, we're definitely going to go over all that stuff.
Thank you.
And then as far as setting up a Zoom call, I could probably even start with, like next week, I'll show you how in this case with Zoom, how you just set up the meeting. And then you're the moderator. And you can use Zoom to record it. And it looks like we're still recording. We have other ways to screen record also. I was going to do that too as an example today, but I had a technical issue over there with those other computers. I wasn't getting the sound, so didn't notice that until 2 seconds before we started. So, but the easiest way to do it if you're using Zoom is to just use the Zoom record. But there's other free screen recording options as well. We can talk about all that stuff.
Okay.
Oh, let me see. I see a raised hand. It's finally working. Kitty.
I think you're going to cover this next week, but you can use still images like photos or graphics from a PowerPoint in this video?
Absolutely. Yes. So I should temper that a bit. If you are only using your iPhone to record yourself in that example, you do need to find a way to bring that into an editing platform of some kind. Unless you get creative with it. And we're going to talk about that too,
Okay.
with editing in the camera. So that's another way to do it. If you don't have access to any kind of editing software, but you do have the phone that you can record with, if you record say yourself, and then you want to cut to a graphic that you've created also on your phone, we can play with that. And
Okay, well,
frankly, that takes some experimentation, but we can learn that together. I've done those things before, but if there's a way you can get some kind of editing, app on your phone, that's just much easier to just, put things like that together. Can I ask just off the top, you probably sent this in, but what kind of phone do you have?
I have an Android actually.
So yeah, we'll
A Samsung.
we'll figure out. Okay, we'll figure out what the editing app.
Okay.
If you don't already have one.
Thank you.
Is easy to use. Kevin, I'm going to rely on you for that. So we are partners in the Apple versus PC world as well. Everything around me is all Apple. Most of Kevin's world is PC. So that's where we complement each other in our expertise as well. We're coming up on 1:28. So real quick, does anybody else have any questions?
So I have a question.
Who's, I can't see who's talking. Shout it out.
It's Agnes. Agnes, you're on mute.
Am I still on mute?
There you are. We
Okay.
got you.
I was asked the question, do we have homework for next week? Do we have to pick our topic and what we need to express, what topic we want to talk about?
So that's our assignment.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's the assignment for next
If you
time.
look at the, that's the idea. If you can all come back next week with that boiled down sentence, what is the story? What is the video you want to make?
Right.
If you're feeling ambitious, fill out that whole treatment template. There's no wrong way to do it. So please don't feel intimidated by, again, the verbose examples that I included in the handout. I think if you've got that first part of that handout, this is really for you to put your thoughts down on paper. And if you're really feeling even more ambitious and feel like you're ready to start writing the narrative part of it, and you can make a 2-column, or a 2-column document, go for it. I mean, anything you bring next week beyond that one sentence is great. So please feel free to do that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, if you're really feeling ambitious, sometimes when we have time, we'll make a storyboard, and that is a visual representation of the script. And it could be stick figures. That's how we usually whip them out. But sometimes if we have time, we'll drop in images. They may just be images off the internet. We're just grabbing screen grabs. In this case, I had the luxury to actually shoot it first, and I went back and made the storyboard, probably because just so I knew how I wanted to edit it. But anyway, that's if you're feeling really ambitious. It's certainly not required, but for some visual learners and people that need to see it laid out, it's a great way to just try to figure out how to take your rough script and to put it in some kind of storyboard form. So I really did just want you to see that. But then next week, when we get into the production basics, this is my chance to sound fancy. Mise en scène, which literally means placing on stage, is everything that's in the shot. That's it for filmmakers anyway, who went to film school. The ones that didn't probably never even heard this, but this is what they do for a living. So this is the idea of everything you see on the screen, the composition, the lighting, props in the background. I don't know if you notice I propped out the Emmys back there. The composition of your shot, that's what we're talking about next week. How to make that composition work and be engaging, look good, be well lit, with no matter what you have. If you got a ring light, great. If you've got window light, you want to know not to put them behind you like I did. I wanted to show you a bad example. Although in my case, it's kind of blown out back there and there's enough light on me. So that's another way too. But most times you're going to want to have your light source in front of you. So we'll go over all that stuff next week. Okay, if there's no other questions, I would like to thank everybody. Thank you so much for giving us an hour today, only 2 days after a hurricane, and hope everybody's okay and everybody's doing well. And if you have any questions, you can either reach out to us with the email that I used to send you the invitation. That was my personal email, or info@3rmedia.tv, but the personal one's fine too. So feel free to reach out if you have any other further questions. And it was nice to see you all today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes.
I think it'll just be me next week.
Right.
Correct, Kevin? Yeah. But if you have any questions for Kevin, I'll forward them to him too, because you're probably wondering where he's sitting. We call that Moonbase Alpha, and we can explain all that if you have a question. Oh, and if you have any questions about his cat as well. Okay, so you're all free to go. I'll leave this on in case anybody did have any follow-up questions. But thanks again. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Have a good day.
You too.
You all too.
Come on, everyone.
Thank you.